I got a comment the other day asking me what are some good dividend growth stocks to be looking into. And so in today's video, I'm picking 5 stocks for you guys that have to mostly meet 4 different criteria. And those are they need to have at least a 2% yield, because anything less than 2%, that's just such a small dividend. We want at least 2%. And we also want a payout ratio that is below 50%, so that there's plenty of room to grow that dividend out a lot more, plenty of cash still to be paying larger dividends over time. We also want a double-digit dividend growth rate so that we know that management is actually committed to growing that dividend. They're actually growing it, actively growing it. And so we want at least a double-digit percentage there. And then we also want a double-digit growth history of consecutive years so that we have a track record of management actually sticking to their word and actually increasing that dividend over time. And ideally, we would also want the stock prices themselves to be somewhat attractive at today's levels for the long term. So it's going to make for a fun video. I picked 5 stocks that generally meet those different criteria. I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's get started. What's up, everyone? My name is Ale. Welcome back to my world of stocks. All right, we got 5 stocks to run through, so let's not waste any time. Let's jump straight into this list. Okay, now we're not generally going in any particular order, but for stock number 1, I think I would like to kick things off with a stock that I actually own myself, and it's one that I honestly love holding because of the fantastic dividend that it comes with, and that stock is none other than AbbVie, ticker symbol ABBV, which is a pretty popular biotech stock. They're the company behind Humira, which when you exclude the Pfizer V shot for the pepperoni, Humira is projected to once again be the best-selling drug this year at over $20 billion for just that one single product. That's pretty crazy. Unfortunately for AbbVie, though, they are expected to lose patent protection on that drug in the United States next year. But not only will it still continue to rake in billions of dollars for years to come, but AbbVie has also done a great job in recent years of diversifying away from it. For example, their newer autoimmune disease drugs called Skyrizi and Rinvoq are expected to do over $15 billion in combined sales by 2025. AbbVie also made a huge acquisition for Allergan worth over $60 billion, which gave them added exposure to several therapeutic markets, including Allergan's experience in medical aesthetics, vision care, the central nervous system, and gastrointestinal disorders as well. Altogether, AbbVie now owns close to 40 different brands and a gigantic pipeline that they've got of close to 80 more drugs that are on the way, or at least, being worked on. Now, as a result, their net income more than doubled in 2021, while sales grew by over $10 billion as well. Granted, their sales will likely fall a little next year when Humira loses patent protection, and the stock price itself is also very high right now, considering that it does trade near an all-time high. But even here, their valuation is still significantly cheaper than the rest of the sector, while their dividend also remains one of the most attractive in the market, with a yield of about 3.5% and a low payout ratio of about 40%, so it's very safe. And yet, despite the large yield, they still have a 5-year growth rate of fairly close to 20%, which is fantastic. And if you think that's good, the dividend growth history of only 8 years that is shown there, it's actually incorrect because it doesn't include their massive history before being spun off, which once you include that, which everyone does include, analysts, everyone knows that you're supposed to include that. And when you include it, AbbVie is actually considered a dividend king with a growth history of 50 years in a row. I mean, what's not to like here if you're thinking dividend growth long term? Okay, now moving on to stock number 2, we're going to jump on over to Lockheed Martin, ticker symbol LMT, which is a stock that I don't own myself yet, but I've definitely thought about it many times because of the reliability of their business along with the attractively growing dividend. Speaking on the business part first, Lockheed is a global security, aerospace, and defense type of company with huge businesses in military aircraft, cybersecurity, missile defense, and even space exploration and defense, which we all know is going to be a high growth market in the future, given that the US, of course, even developed an entirely new military branch just for that alone, called Space Force, and that was done a couple years ago. And really, just military and defense in general are areas that nobody really expects spending to go down, over the long term, especially right now during the Russian Ukrainian conflict, and with China becoming a larger global player, and there's always tensions there, the likelihood that they'll probably try to invade Taiwan at some point. All of these different things can escalate into larger global conflicts at any moment, and that's going to lead to consistent military spending on companies like Lockheed Martin, even just for precautionary or deterrent or preparation purposes, anything like that. I think spending will continue to increase over time. In fact, the world spent about $2 trillion just on defense alone in 2020, and the US made up close to half of that entire market, which is a great thing for Lockheed Martin since they typically generate around 70% of their sales just from the US government alone. Now, the con is that LMT's financials will never really see super high growth because, US military spending, it only tends to grow by small amounts every year. However, because it's already so massively large, it provides LMT with giant sales and profits, a ton of stability, and a huge amount of long-term contracts that make it really one of the safest dividend options out there if you think about it. Unfortunately, the stock is trading at some of the highest levels in history, but even here, it's only up around 60% over the past 5 years, so it's been a little suppressed in my opinion, leaving its dividend yield at over 2.5%, with a really low payout ratio of less than 40%, just about a double-digit 5-year growth rate, and over 2 decades of consecutive growth to top it all off. I don't think that dividend is going anywhere, and over the long term, I think it makes for a great dividend growth stock. It can be a little volatile though, so picking it up on a dip is probably the best strategy, and it's what I'm planning to do myself, but long term, I really don't see any reason why it couldn't, continue to perform well. Okay, moving on to stock number 3. Let's try to get back up above a 3% yield again, but let's still keep those growth metrics intact, and for that, we're going to have to go back to another biotech for a second and talk about Amgen, ticker symbol AMGN, excuse me, who, like AbbVie, Amgen also has a robust lineup of products, including 10 blockbuster drugs generating more than $1 billion each. That's what blockbuster means. When you hear blockbuster drug, means generates over $1 billion in sales for the year. They've got 10 of those. But also like AbbVie, Amgen too is facing some expiring patent issues, which has kept the stock only up less than 50% over the past 5 years, kind of, a little suppressed there. And it's trading around 30% cheaper than the sector as a result. As a lot of it is because of that fear of losing patents on some of their products. However, again, just like AbbVie, they've been developing new products to take their place, and that should result in a sustainable and growing dividend over the long term. More recently, Amgen gained approval for osteoporosis treatment Evenity in 2019. They also gained approval for cancer medicine Lumacross in 2021, and they got priority approval for asthma treatment Tezspire. You guys can tell that I slow down when I pronounce these words because they're a little different there. But Tezspire, that was done last year, and that one is claimed to be the first and only biologic to consistently and significantly reduce asthma exacerbations across phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trials. Now, these are drugs that will only grow in sales over time. They've got a lot of potential, and with Amgen's robust pipeline of over 30 more products on the way, their profits are expected to continue growing by over 7% a year over the next 5 years. It's not super high, but it's consistent. Just as important though is their dividend, and that's what really makes Amgen an attractive stock to own long term, as they not only have a low payout ratio of less than 40%, a double-digit growth rate of close to 12%, and a decade of consecutive growth, but the dividend is also already yielding well above 3%. Definitely a good option if you're looking for an already decent sized dividend that will also very likely continue to grow over time. Now, I will say though, just want to throw this in there that I actually like Merck a little more. I like Merck's business a little more, and they still have a very similar dividend that actually yields just slightly more, but it also has slightly less growth on it, so it didn't really meet the criteria for today's video because of the lower growth. However, I generally like Merck more myself, and that's why I prefer to invest in Merck over Amgen. So I don't own Amgen stock. I do own Merck, and I really like Merck, but I really think both stocks are good long-term options. I just don't like to be overly exposed to biotech, so that's why I stick with like AbbVie, and then I also have Merck, and then admittedly I do also have Pfizer. So anyway, take that how you will. But for the purposes of this video, Amgen is our stock number 3. Okay, moving on to stock number 4. That's going to be Snap On, ticker symbol SNA. And this is actually a new stock that I've been doing research on lately, like new to me. I've been researching it fairly recently now. I started. And the more that I learn about them, the more I like what I see. But they basically manufacture and sell various tools and equipment and offer various services related to diagnostics, repair information, and system solutions. And they operate in a number of large markets like government and military, natural resources, mining, agriculture, aviation, and aerospace. And they even help vehicle dealerships with their repair centers. So they do a lot of that kind of repair work, tools, equipment, all that kind of stuff. This is what they specialize in: diagnostics, all that kind of stuff. Now it's if you were to ask me, those type of services, they're very needed. Those are things that nobody really expects to ever go away. You're always going to need a company like this performing these kind of services and helping you out and providing the tools and equipment and systems and all that kind of stuff. And that's led to some solid financials for them over the years. Now, there was a slight dip during the 2020 recession, as you would probably expect. Budgets come down, recession time. So there was a dip there. But they quickly recovered from that, posting sales growth of 17% in 2021 with net income growth of over 30%. Now, during normal times, let's be honest here, they typically experience low single-digit growth on their financials, but it's pretty stable. And I would also say that the opposite is true about their high-flying dividend that already yields close to 3%, and yet it's already been grown for over a decade straight with a 5-year growth rate of 15%, which is pretty darn good. And as long as their financials remain intact, which I have really no doubt that they will over the long term, I think they have a lot of sustainability when you look at the business. I think that dividend should only get larger over time, as their payout ratio is super low at less than 35%. That's a really low payout ratio. You've got plenty of room to keep growing it there. And I think that's what we're going to see when we really look at it long term. And by the way, that dividend history of 12 years, that doesn't even give you the full picture, because they actually paid a consecutive dividend without reducing it for over 8 decades in a row. So that's a very long time. Yeah, maybe there was times where they didn't necessarily grow it, but they paid it without reducing it for over 8 decades. So it's a very sustainable, at the very least, you're not going to be seeing that dividend get cut. I mean, I really don't think you're going to see that. And in all actuality, again, you should only see it continue to grow a lot more over time. Like their financials, though, the stock price also recovered by a large amount following the 2020 recession, but a recent dip has left them trading near the very bottom of their 52-week range and a P ratio that is about 30% cheaper than the sector. And that's why I started to research them myself. I saw that dip. I see that they're trading cheaper than the sector. It's catching my attention. At these levels, combined with that really nice growing dividend, I think Snap-on is worth considering, and I'm definitely moving it up on my watch list all the time, and it's one that I may be buying here soon. I'm definitely very interested myself. All right, guys, that leaves us now with the 5th and final stock, and for this one, I'm gonna go with a retail name, which I typically don't like brick and mortar retailers because of the retail apocalypse brought on by Amazon and others. But this is one that is actually pretty immune to all of that, and they've shown that they can grow their online presence as well, which is pretty impressive. And that name is Home Depot, ticker symbol HD, who is obviously they're famous for selling home improvement products, and they've become a convenient kind of one-stop shop for everything you might need when it comes to home improvement, all that kind of stuff. That's really led to a very sticky business, I would say, that it even thrived during the last recession and through the pandemic because, people were staying home and thus they were trying to improve their living situations, or they were working on various home improvement projects. So it sent their sales skyrocketing. I mean, take a look at it. In 2020, HD's revenue skyrocketed by 20%, and then it still managed to grow another 14% in 2021, despite the really hard comparison to 2020. Now, that sales growth is expected to plummet all the way back down to low single digits this year and the next. But come on, that's to be expected after such a meteoric rise. There's no way a company like this, big, giant retailer is going to be able to keep those gigantic growth rates. And besides that, though, they've managed to capture, because, I mentioned online shopping, they managed to capture the fifth most market share of online shopping as a US company. I mean, that's very impressive. I was kind of surprised by that. They're even ahead of giants like Target, Best Buy, and many other popular names. Now, the stock price itself soared during the pandemic. As a result, because of what happened, their sales went up, so the stock price soared as well. But a recent drop of almost 30% has now left it near the bottom of its 52-week range, and that's why I'm starting to get interested myself. Anytime a stock is, near the 52-week lows, that's when I really start to look into certain stocks a lot closer. And that drop also left them with a pretty attractive dividend, which is also, getting me interested for that as well. You're talking about a low payout ratio of less than 50%, a super nice growth rate of close to 20%, and a double-digit growth history of 13 years. On top of all that, their yield is already pretty good at over 2.5%. So you couple the nice dividend with the lower stock price after the drop, and they're fairly, recession-resistant business, because anytime during a recession, people tend to do more of like do-it-yourself projects. They tend to try to save money, so they're not going to hire other people. They'll try to do it themselves. So they'll go to Home Depot and they'll buy the things that they need to do these projects themselves, and that tends to make Home Depot at least a little more recession resistant than others. Probably expect that dividend to keep growing even through a recession. And so when you combine all those positives, I think you've got a pretty good long-term stock here. Again, it's not one that I own yet myself, but it is very high up on my watch list, and I may be picking it up soon, especially if it continues to fall like it has. Anyway, those are the stocks for now. Let me know what you guys think down below. Any stocks you'd like to add to the list that maybe can meet some of that criteria. Also, let me know if you guys would like to see a bonus dividend growth stocks video where I can talk about some extra stocks that didn't make today's list. And if you have any recommendations, let me know down below. I might include them in the next video. I'll definitely look into them and I'll give them a real consideration, especially if a lot of people like them. So let me know down in the comment section how you feel. And hope you're all doing well out there. I will catch you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.